Believe for me, just stay.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the podcast where we talk about remembering, forgetting, memories, and dementia. This is Formembering, and I'm your host, John Samples. Later, we'll hear again from that other John Samples, my father, as we talk about these issues with Doctors Pat and Diane Healey, two passionate retired physicians who are giving back to people and to caregivers of people with dementia issues.
Factors, and if you're treating them, what you need to do then is put all this stuff out of your brain and enjoy life.
Yeah.
Because could you have dementia in 10 years? Yeah, you could. Is it automatic you're going to have it in 10 years or whatever? I'm making up the number. No. But you could. No one can tell you it's not, but they can't tell me I'm not going to have it either.
Yeah.
Right.
So to get yourself all worried about it, only unfortunately, makes the stress worse.
I'm also looking forward to introducing you to Jean Ross. We were talking about something completely different when an interview broke out.
And I just see so much of our nursing time wasted, and which also is a family time wasted in doing these typing out and filling out forms and faxing when we just want to take care of the person. So how do we just speed up some of these processes so that care can be better delivered?
Yes, it has been a minute since our last podcast. Truthfully, I've been reluctant to do this one because I think it's important that you know some of the reasons I've become interested and active in the dementia universe. And I'm reluctant to tell you because this is something most of us would rather never talk about, much less putting it on the internet. But here goes. Several weeks ago, my family was having a debate about what movie to watch on TV. I saw an ad for Twisters and said, I've been wanting to watch that. With my wife and daughter glancing at each other, that side-eye thing, they both insisted that we'd seen it in the theater. Well, I insisted that they were thinking of someone else and that I wanted to watch it. And we did. I thought it was a nice little film, and when it was done, I assured them I had never seen it. Nothing else was said about it, and we all went to bed. Well, the next morning, I decided to cut a quick little video journal entry of sorts, just in case that disagreement ever came back to bite me, so I'd have evidence. Here's a bit of that recording. Every now and then something happens in my own memory journey that I just want to journal, I suppose. And last night was certainly one. We were looking for a movie to watch, and I suggested Twisters. It's one that I've always wanted to see since it came out this past summer. And, the short version is, apparently I did see it in July. I have absolutely no memory of it. I even texted my daughter and asked her if she had seen the movie just to see if she just answered no, but then she texted her mother and saying, why are we going through this again? My wife was just sure that watching it would generate some memories, rebuild some memories, or whatever we want to call that. And so we watched it. Never had a moment of deja vu or anything else. And so it just dawned on me, I wonder if I may have done one of these remembering moments about that conversation that we had a few weeks ago. That'll be for you all to discover, because once I record these, I don't want to hear them again until it's showtime. And these are the only symptoms that I'm actually having, and they don't seem to be a pattern that we're familiar with. So I'm just recording them, and if they come to mean something, great. If they never do, that's just 3 minutes of your life you'll never get back. Now, as I was saving that video clip, I noticed another file named the same as I had just named this one, and already in the same place I was going to save this one. So naturally, I opened it, and here's what I said there. Really struggling this morning with loss of going to see the movie Twisters. And not only did I go with my wife, I went with my brother-in-law and sister-in-law, and apparently it was a really good movie. And when we made just conversation last night talking about it, and we saw a trailer come up, and I said, oh, we got to watch that sometime. And so it's been a thing. Last night, this morning, been trying to find receipts, been trying to do this and that, and it's just completely gone for me, like it never happened. And I don't know what that means. I'm just going to start recording these, and when it happens, and I'll probably, I'm also thinking about including some of the other ones that I've written down to put them into audio form. So we'll see how this goes, special segments or whatever. It's a journey, guys. Thanks for taking it with me. So if my math is right, I've now watched Twisters 3 times. Unfortunately, this is not the only example I can give of my own memory issues, but it's the only one I'm going to give you for now. And it is important to note that over the past months, nearly a year now, I have been poked and prodded and examined and therapied, and so far, I'm one of the few people I know with so much proof that absolutely nothing's wrong with me. I usually feel pretty good about that kind of news, and I still do. However, I've also learned that, well, my wife was talking to a friend of hers recently, someone she hadn't talked to in a while, and we were both so sad to hear that that friend had just put her husband into a memory care unit, and that 5 years ago he had been poked and prodded and declared free from any dementia disease or diagnosis. I'm not saying that this is my circumstance. I'm just saying that this is just another reason I've become so interested in formembering. Well, if you believe in accidents, I had one recently when I ran into Gene Ross at a seminar about medical portals of all things. Gene has a company that's doing some really great work making these tools more useful for all of us, but that's not really why she's here today. She was helping me get my portals working when she made reference to her role as a Dementia Champion, and it was on. Fortunately, she was recording our virtual meeting for her customer service records, so when I realized this was a podcastable moment, Gene was delighted to give me a copy of our time together.
What drives you in the elder care dementia thing?
What drives me is I just cannot stand it when families aren't getting the help. And I think the other piece is that they get frustrated with my colleagues, nurses, because we're the one in front of you and we're not the problem most of the time, right? There are some bad eggs in all professions. And I just see so much of our nursing time wasted, and which also is a family time wasted in doing these typing out and filling out forms and faxing when we just want to take care of the person. So how do we just speed up some of these processes so that care can be better delivered?
So it's the same thing that's driving you in the business model in general, but also personally.
Exactly. It's just, I want to fix something, John. I just want the problem solved. Like, I just want this to be better for families.
Can you tell me about the Avon thing?
Oh yeah. So I'm a Dementia Champion. I became a Dementia Champion right when I think there was 100 Dementia Friends in Indiana. So Dustin Ziegler.
I don't know what that means.
Okay, so Dementia Friends Indiana is a program, and if you came, I'll have some at Hamilton County Library. We're planning one in the fall, so I'll make sure you get an invite.
Okay.
It actually was stolen from the United Kingdom because Japan and UK are a little bit ahead of us in the curve of aging population, and something that they identified was dementia becomes a very overwhelming experience in their communities. So they created this educational program because they saw that there was a lot of stigma. People were hiding their dementia because they were ashamed of it. People didn't know where to go to get help. So it is a educational program that you do out in the community that's trying to change the mindset around dementia. And so I fell in love with it because of the kind of element of, health education. But basically, there are dementia champions that go out in their community and deliver this 45-minute to an hour talk that goes through just the overview of dementia, what is dementia, signs and symptoms of it. It does an empathy exercise where it makes you write out the steps of a simple task and then make people relate to what that must be like if your brain has that disease and it can't connect those dots. And then by the end, so it's trying to say, because what I love is I open up with describe someone with dementia and it's all sad, right? Oh, they're nursing home, not able to do things. But by the end, it's starting to realize the responsibility is on us. Like someone with dementia just needs support and help, but we haven't built that infrastructure. So as a dementia friend, here are things that you can go do. I don't know. It's one of my favorite things that I do. And so I've been doing that talk. We've used it to, Saxony adopted it. So they're a dementia-friendly hospital. But they basically just, go through our program and just change minds around this dementia. It's the reason doctors sometimes don't want to tell people that they have dementia because everyone's so scared of it, right? Like we just got to lean in and say, this is disease just like cancer. What's the treatment path? And because there's no treatment, I think a lot of people, that's why we don't talk about it, but there's many, many things you can be doing in your community to better support these individuals. So that's kind of the whole conversation. Not a very short answer, but
great answer.
We've done it in front of the med students. That's been my favorite. I think we now have 16,000 dementia friends in Indiana. So, and I'm telling you, John, I've done this presentation at bars. I've done it in basements of people's homes. And then my favorite's been the library. I just formed a partnership at the library. And then they just call on me when they want to do a session for, to kind of check their box for aging adult education. And so then I come in and I'll do a program.
I'm thinking, man, I need to set up on one of these presentations and just shoot the whole thing. If that
would be so cool. Yeah. No, and I'm happy. Like, even if you had a group of friends that you want to do, I can do that and we can record and they can all be like excited. So I've done it for 3 people and I've done it for audiences of 150. So it's an adaptable.
Like you don't have enough to do with your business.
Well, that's kind of why I had to scale back. Suko is the administrator of the program. And so they train the champions. They help us connect, and get us doing our presentations out in the community and support us with what's the presentation? What are the changes? Here's the new resources you need to be talking about. But they put out the bat signal because I guess they have 50 people at Avon Library that have signed up and they don't have a dementia champion. So I was like, so they sent out an email to all of us dementia champions. Can anyone cover, this next Tuesday? And I hadn't done one in a long time and I really need it.
Last question on this topic.
Okay.
So suddenly I'm interviewing you instead of.
I know. I'm just helping you.
How does a person become a dementia champion?
It's on our website, Dementia Friends Indiana. There's a form that you fill out. And really you just go through a training session where you learn. I think the most nerve-wracking thing is that it's public speaking, which you don't obviously have a problem with if you're interested in becoming a champion. But yeah, you just go through on how do you deliver a dementia friend session? How do you handle certain questions? How do you deliver the topics that we have outlined in this packet? Because everyone gets a workbook and then you basically work from the workbook with the group on, the dementia friend session. So you're just learning how to kind of be a teacher for an hour. It's an awesome program. I can't, it fills my bucket every time I do it.
Okay. It is. Give me the website again.
Okay. DementiaFriendsIndiana.org.
It's longer than my website.
I know. I do feel for them.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Now, I guess this is my last question. Can I get a copy of this recording so I can use that because I wasn't recording?
I know. I realize that. Yes. I'll make sure.
I was going to ask you at the end if I could turn on the recorder and get some of that, but
no, absolutely.
I'd very much like to do that.
Yeah. So yeah, I'll make sure you get a copy and you let me know if you can access it. All right.
That's amazing. Well, this other stuff seems less.
I know. Well, but
not from you.
Right. No, but the primary record is, it's those years of watching families struggle. Yeah. And it's like, how do you help the masses, John? Like the journey, anyone's journey in health is so personal, but we don't have a personalized way. It just takes so much effort to personalize care.
I'm guessing Jean will be back on the show in the future, and we hope her business does really well because I think it has great value. I know it does to me. I was introduced to Jean and to our next guests that are coming up in just a couple of minutes by a dedicated group of attorneys, people that I truly believe enjoy helping other people that are facing these kinds of challenges as they grow older, as we grow older. Okay. You might also recognize their ability to pick good talent for their TV commercials as they bring their message to you right now. When my father-in-law's health began to decline, calling a law firm was not my first thought. But as we navigated the challenges of managing and affording his care, it became clear we needed professional help. Dillman and Owen took the time to understand my father-in-law's wishes, his health and finances, and put together a plan that really gave my family peace of mind.
Call Dillman and Owen Estate and Elder Law. Aging doesn't have to be complicated.
We do appreciate the folks at Dillman and Owen. Now, Pat and Diane Healey both had very successful careers as doctors. Now they have both retired, but I think they may have just transitioned from paying positions to volunteer positions. And they are getting a great reputation here in Indiana and elsewhere for their work with dementia patients and their caregivers. I've got your mission and your vision and your values purpose from your website, which is just kind of remarkable. You afraid of retirement or something?
No, loving retirement. Yeah, but
This is your retirement.
And she needs to keep busy.
And you've been married 40 years, so you both know that and can get away with that.
I need a purpose still.
Okay.
I need a purpose. So being able to kind of help expand some of the experience and knowledge that we've learned over the past 35 years is one of those things that I feel like gives me purpose. I've offered him the out several times, and he always says, no, he's very, he could go on without doing it, but he's thrilled to help when I say, okay, we got something to do here. What do you want to do? Because I still feel like we have something to give back.
And especially when you're doing the website and the blog and the scheduling, and he's happy to contribute to all.
I put the slides together when we're doing lectures, and I say, here's your slides. Are you okay with those? He's good.
I'll support her every step of the way.
There you go. Well, I appreciate both of you being here very much. Where does dementia fit into what you're trying to do?
You will hear us, and the day we saw you before, you heard us talking about the 4 M's. Of caring for older adults. So we need to know what matters with every older adult. We need to know what's important to them. What are their goals? We need to know about their medications, because that plays a big role as we get older in terms of whether they're helping us or no longer helping us or maybe even harming in some way. We need to know about mobility, because being able to function is what most older adults want most. Okay, they don't really care about the whole medical thing if they can't function. But in here comes mentation. That's the other M. So if we are still doing well cognitively, that's wonderful. But if not, we need to figure that out so that we can help people, and your families can help, and whoever needs to can help support and do what we need to do to continue to try to aim towards our goals. So dementia comes in there a lot, because we're looking to either say, no, that's not what's going on. We don't have that. It's depression, or it's your medicines, or whatever else it might be. Or yes, we do have dementia, and let's acknowledge it and let's work with it.
And if a diagnosis of dementia is made, the person with the dementia may not be able to exercise what matters. So we need to have the conversation ahead of time so that other members of the family know, what are your goals? What's important to you even after you are unable to make that decision?
Which you've had very personal experience with recently.
Right.
Both of you?
Both of
Okay. She does the blog, so she's the only one that I know about. But 20 years that she lived after the diagnosis. Can you just walk us through that in a couple of minutes, and then we'll drill into some questions?
Sure, absolutely. So my mom was diagnosed with dementia 20 years ago. 20 years is a long time to live with dementia. So early on, though, it was early. I mean, she initially was driving for a little bit, still lived on her own, but when we realized those things were no longer safe, they were no longer things that should be doing, we had her move here to Indianapolis so she was closer to us. And then we, were there and moving her at the appropriate times to the appropriate levels of care, with us supporting her all along. And her wishes, it was funny. Early on, she said to us, because with both of us being geriatricians, when she was at our house a lot, she'd hear us shop talk sometimes. And she'd say, if I ever get dementia, just shoot me. Well, she had the diagnosis by the time she was saying that, but she didn't remember. You know, when you're given that diagnosis, you only need to be given it once because you probably won't remember. So you don't need to keep pushing it. So we didn't push it, but she said, just shoot me. She was jokingly saying that. She was okay at that point. But what we took from that is what matters to you. What mattered to her was she did not want to live any longer than needed with that diagnosis. So that helped us kind of plot the course for what should we do along the way with things that bring her comfort, but with medical care as well. And so we didn't pursue intense working up at everything that came along, although having said that, she was pretty darn healthy.
I imagine you did not envision this being a 20-year
No,
journey.
absolutely not. No.
What was the diagnosis?
The diagnosis was dementia. And, you know, it doesn't really matter whether it's broken down a lot of the times into Alzheimer's dementia or a vascular dementia. I mean, it does for academic purposes, but many times for day-to-day living, you know, the exact kind may not matter. So,
But we had a conversation just this morning because I've had a couple of tough days this week. Probably the toughest day-to-day 3 days that I've had in a long, long time. Well, ever, relative to this piece. And I made the comment to Dad, we're going to get into some ethics here, because I made the comment to Dad, very much like your mom said, I don't want that for me, but even more, I don't want that for my wife or my kids.
right.
But then the question comes back, well, what if they invent a drug tomorrow that cures it? And so then we get into our religious precepts of who is it for us to say that we take a life, but yet for a whole lot less than that, we put our beloved animals down. Have you navigated all that, or is it still you're just doing the best you can every day, and how do you help others through that?
It's a thorny issue. It's an ethical issue. What matters helps a great deal. But once you have made the what matters statement, operationalizing that is really where it gets difficult, because you can't predict what kind of a road you're going to be on and what kind of other problems will come up. But it does give you a framework. You know, I don't want anything intensive done, or, you know, you can plot it out, but you don't know what's going to happen down the road. Her mom had very good quality of life until very, very late on in her course. Again,
Her whole life, not just during dementia.
Her dementia life mirrored her prior life, calm waters, you know, and she was healthy. And so we didn't have to make major decisions, but we knew that she would not want to have intensive workups to prolong her life. So we encouraged, mandated, made it clear that we did not need everything done for her, because it was not her wish to prolong life. You know, when you're young and healthy, absolutely, you do it all. But when you're 80 with dementia, and you've said, I don't want to prolong this, then medical science, you have to sort of slow down what I call the medical industrial complex, and then say, well, listen, this is not consistent with what she wants. And that was probably the hardest thing, was, she communicating with the physicians and the nurses saying, I don't think we need to do this. I don't think she wants to go to the emergency room, even though the forces were saying, I think we should do this. And so she did a brilliant job of keeping her out of the hospital, but yet giving her the best quality of care. But just, we made decisions based upon her what matters.
But don't the professional caregivers, which you have been in some capacity, don't they have an ethical obligation to press for life-sustaining measures?
They have an obligation to offer choices.
Would they all say it the same way? Have I just misinterpreted it, or are there a couple of schools of thought on that?
Well, being geriatricians, we look at things a bit differently. Okay, so it's not full bore ahead, you've got a heart pain, therefore we do a cardiac cath, therefore we do X, Y, Z. It's, and again, we're talking older adults, often with multiple chronic conditions, or at least dementia. Maybe you might not have multiple things, but dementia kind of is its own, beast, if you will. We can do this cardiac cath and that would lead to X and to Y and to Z, or we don't have to. We don't have to. It is, so we go back to, what are your goals? If your goals are to live as long as possible and to have every opportunity, we better do this cardiac cath. If your goal is, I have dementia, or my mom has dementia and her goal was never to live longer than she needed, with that disease, she wouldn't do anything to take her own life, but, let nature take its course here. What would happen?
Okay, if I get way past your comfort level here, just shut me down, we'll edit it out. Is the law up to date on these things? For example, at what point does a dementia patient have the ability to make their own call if they don't have a family caregiver?
The law is somewhat behind, and that's not an indictment of where our ethics are, and that's kind of that's the way this works. The law needs to be very conservative. You've heard of the slippery slope, and we have to be very, very careful about encountering the slippery slope. But that doesn't mean that you can't do ethically bound treatment within the guidelines of the law. So we would never consider, in America, we don't, well, there's only a few states that have, assisted suicide. The problem with dementia is when the time comes that you may have specified you don't want to live any longer, you may not remember that. You may not be able to do the process, which I think is what the film, I'm maybe saying wrong, Just Alice or Simply Alice, she couldn't remember to do it. And someone would have to help her. Well, that makes them complicit under the law. So it's ethically very difficult. And we have never had to face this because we've never had this life expectancy issue. People are living so long. People that we deal with, most of them have already achieved their maximum life expectancy. We always say, when you're young, you want to maximize your life expectancy, maximize your quality of life. But our folks are there. They've achieved longevity. Now what? Now what's important? And so, again, these are thorny ethical issues that we are dealing with as a culture that we have never had to deal before.
And I think you were also asking, John, about, I would throw the word in, I think, capacity. When does someone with dementia no longer have capacity to make their own decisions? So that's something that you may need your, medical team to help do some kind of cognitive testing to help tell you whether this person has the capacity any longer to make their own decisions. And it's based on them understanding the question, understanding the consequences of what happens with that question. They don't have to remember it an hour later, but they have to understand at the time, okay, if I choose this, what is the consequences of that? If I don't choose this, what are the consequences of that?
So you can have dementia and still have capacity.
For a while.
That's a fascinating aspect that I have trouble with. Frankly, I want to have trouble with that. Just this morning, Dad and I were having a conversation about this, and and something came up that I did yesterday, and I part of my answer was, my fear is that I'm already one of these people, and that an hour ago I knew I had dementia or Alzheimer's, and now I just don't know it, so I feel fine. There was a great Glen Campbell video.
Yes.
Oh, that's brilliant.
Where they say, "How are you doing on Alzheimer's?" And he goes, "What?"
Yeah.
Right.
How's the Alzheimer's coming along, Glenn?
What is?
Alzheimer's.
Oh, that's fine, yeah. I gave him a left hook. It's nothing wrong with me, I just can't remember anything. No, I've been a lot better. It don't bother me. Something you got to live with. But it's been really wonderful. Actually, hadn't it, honey?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
You're doing a great thing by doing this film.
Well, if I did, thank you for it.
Oh, I'm fine. I just can't remember anything. But it's been great, hasn't it, honey? She just rolls her eyes.
It's so good. It's so poignant.
And I am so afraid of being that person. But yet I have seen so many of those people bring joy still into people's lives. And it's a conflict.
Absolutely.
Yep.
And Dad didn't respond. He just put his head in his hands. So. Speaking of which, you had a thing this week with the ear doctor.
Oh, yeah.
Ask.
Yeah. I losing some of my hearing abilities, but they're talking softly and faster.
Yes, that's right. We've heard that before.
He had some charts up on the wall talking about loss of hearing and why you shouldn't ignore it. And one of the things he said was loss of hearing unattended to can lead to depression.
Absolutely.
It can lead to dementia.
Absolutely.
Sure can.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and I find that quite interesting.
And that's kind of a rather new finding, in terms of, dementia, is that the hearing loss. So years ago, I would say to people, if you need a hearing aid and you're not willing to wear it, that's your choice. If you have a hearing loss, you need to know that and get it checked out and treat it so that you don't have one more risk factor for dementia.
Well, this is a question that probably means nothing at the end of the day, but do you have any sense whether the kind of thing he's talking about, where one thing leads to another thing, is it biological, or is it your brain stops exercising and then is more open to dementia? Does that make any sense?
We just know that it's a causative factor, or a contributing factor might be a better way of putting it. People who can't hear tend to withdraw.
Yes.
And, we do know that people who withdraw socially are more likely to have cognitive difficulties, and it also can lead to dementia down the road. So it's not a cause and effect, but it is a contributing factor.
And there's family in there, in terms of that hearing and then dementia. I don't think we know enough yet to really know that. I'm going to guess, at least at this point in time, long enough of not hearing, and any of us are at increased risk of dementia. Does that mean that we're automatically going to get it? No. But it's one more thing, one more little piece that can...
And, one of the things we talk about trying to postpone the onset of dementia is people who are socially and culturally and spiritually engaged are less likely to fall into cognitive disarray than those who are not. Very interesting. Again, it's kind of soft, but it's real.
I thought jigsaw puzzles was the answer.
Some people say crossword puzzles.
Crosswords, yeah.
Right. It's
Wordle.
Yeah.
You started to say something, Diane.
Don't remember.
Okay.
Not
going there.
My wife and I had our older son, John Wayne's brother, passed away suddenly at 41 years of age, and his widow did quite well for a while, and then she developed Alzheimer's in her mid-50s, and so that was a horrible thing to go through. And actually, my wife and I just kind of moved in with her because they had adopted twins shortly before he died, within a year, and so it was a bucket full. But it was, I think, quite different from what we're talking about here, dementia with the onset of age. Mm-hmm. But anyhow, caregiving is, I've seen that side of it pretty heavy.
I mean, and it's hard work.
Yes,
and
it is.
There's the book called The 36-Hour Day, and it's because as a caregiver, there's no 24-hour day. It's 36 hours in a day when you're a caregiver. So it can be very rewarding. On the other hand, very stressful. It can bring on its own whole...
Yeah, the caregiving issue is underappreciated and undercompensated. And the human toll is immense, and it's silent.
Yeah.
It's
And my dear wife, she did a journal almost daily, missed very few days for almost 14 months, I think, while the daughter-in-law was declining. Of course, the thing about early onset Alzheimer's is it lasts about 10 years.
It's pretty quick.
Yeah,
Right.
it's very quick.
Blessedly.
Well, and some people would say just living with old people would be a problem, much less when they have dementia. But I've not heard that myself.
She might throw me out.
She said you've been through this as well.
Well, yeah, my father, my mentor, had interesting because I know a lot about his dementia because we lived through it. I was not a caregiver. My mother, who's 97, soon to be 98,
Oh my!
survived his caregiving.
She busy this weekend?
She's sharp as a tack. She's amazing.
Well, there you go.
But he had a very unusual course in that he probably had a small stroke and lost some of the brilliance, the judgment, and the reasoning. But yet he was still learning new things. You could not tell. But he was just not as sharp. He was a physician, not as sharp. And my mom knew it, and we could kind of tell. And so he retired, but he was still learning, still working on things, reading. But gradually he started less. He and I could talk medicine for hours, hours, and we'd be at this, the family gatherings. We'd be at this table at the far end talking medicine. Well, that got less and less and less and less, and then he began having behavior problems. So he had a diagnosis of dementia. He did me a big favor. He participated in an autopsy study, so he had a brain autopsy. So he had two forms of dementia: one vascular, because he had a stroke, and had we call microvascular disease, the little tiny blood vessels, but he also had Alzheimer's. So he had both, which is in fact is what we see a tremendous amount. They have both of them, and he displayed both of them. But his brain autopsy helped me out so much. But my mom was the caregiver and required a lot of care, and we were very close and worked together, and she pulled it off. And he never wanted to go to the hospital.
Yeah.
That's a
He
tough
said-
ethical decision.
He said, never take me to the hospital. Never. You know how hard that is?
Yeah,
An
I can
80-something-year-old.
I can imagine.
Yeah,
How old was he when he died?
86. So we both very different presentations, very different situation, but that's it. You know one person with dementia, one person with dementia. They're all so different.
Yeah.
It's just, diabetes is much more homogeneous. A lot of people would disagree with me, but having seen dementia, you're dealing with the person's mind, their personality, their life situation, and their caregiving situation, and their financial resources.
Yeah.
Because it's an expensive disease.
I think that explains why even when I'm doing research, I can't tell if they're talking about dementia or Alzheimer's. It's just the D word.
Dementia is the big umbrella, right? And Alzheimer's is probably the most common form of dementia, but it's not just the only one. You have, of course, vascular disease, heart of the arteries in American culture is so common. And it is a risk factor for Alzheimer's disease, which no one can figure out why it is. But, it complicates Alzheimer's. Alzheimer's, we know what it looks like, but oftentimes people have versions that don't fit the pattern. Like my dad, why did he start off being brilliant, but just his judgment was off a little bit? So he wasn't a typical Alzheimer's, who, typically they don't know. Well, yeah.
So, but that's within the Alzheimer's umbrella that it can present different.
But again, the dementia, the whole big dementia, then here's Alzheimer's, here's vascular, but here's the combination of both. They probably both go hand in hand a lot.
Okay.
Yeah.
Which is kind of why I was alluding earlier that we can't always necessarily, unless we're going to go do academic studies, tell you which kind it is. Sometimes you can tell by the history, but not always. And then there's other forms too. I mean, you can have it from Parkinson's disease, temporal dementia, and alcoholic dementia, but dementia is the big overall term. So the use of the word dementia doesn't specifically say which kind. The use of the word Alzheimer's says, yes, you have dementia, and here's the kind.
From a caregiver standpoint, does it matter which of those it might be very often? Your contorted faces tells me it's a better question than I thought it was.
If it's Lewy body or frontotemporal, those are two of them that have much more difficulty with behaviors, if you will, meaning difficult behaviors. So, for a caregiver, if their loved one
complete changes of personality and things of that nature,
completely and potentially aggressive, and hallucinating, language, and a whole host of things that are not comfortable for the person with dementia, but they're also obviously not comfortable for the caregiver. So, those couple of types, it probably matters more, but you can tell those more easily because those look a little different. Where the others, it's not as important necessarily if it's not obvious to anybody which one, because you still have these, changes that someone needs some help with their finances, and they need help with their cooking, and now they need help with bathing, and et cetera, et cetera. So it doesn't matter which name you want to put on it. It's okay to say dementia.
Would I be wrong to assume that you folks have had some peers, maybe a few years older, but within the going to college at the same time level, that are now in the dementia protocols, if you will?
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
I mean, they're not protected. None of us are protected.
Of course. But as you talk with these people with where you're coming from now, wanting to help people with these issues and understandings, what do the people with the diagnosis fear the most? From the patient standpoint, what strikes you about their fears at this point, while they're still there?
Well, the biggest one is dependency. Nobody wants to be dependent. And that's probably the biggest one. I don't want my wife to have to care for me, whatever. However, frequently, they're far enough along that you can't bring that out. You can't ask them that. They may not be able to express that.
Seriously, many of the times with the diagnosis, again, they're not aware that they have the disease.
Or how bad it is.
So it's well before us now, and I don't know that either of us have it at this point saying, boy, I wouldn't want that. But if you get to the point you probably don't know you have it. Your family does, but you don't necessarily. And again, it's not because no one's telling you, but you don't remember. That's the whole disease, is your memory. You don't remember. I had someone recently asking if they could send their parents to our office our clinic where we used to work, because she knew for sure would tell mom, that she had dementia. They'd already told her at some other facility, and they wanted us to be sure we told her. I said, no. If she's been told once, maybe they'll tell her once, but no one's going to keep telling her.
Any surprises or variables, or just what's the biggest thing there? From the standpoint of someone listening to this, that you would want them to know they're not the only one wrestling.
Absolutely.
That's really key.
That is key, and that they are getting all the help that they can get, whether it's by using the Alzheimer's Association, ALZ.org. There's all kinds of amazing information there that, even if you don't have Alzheimer's but another form of dementia, it is still for that purpose. So there's a whole host of things online, from hard copy things that are very useful. There are, classes that are often offered in varying places for caregivers to help learn better about how to care for their loved ones. So understanding the disease is so important for that caregiver, so they know when something's happening. For example, if there's some paranoia going on, that they understand that, as the caregiver, it's not really about me. I'm taking care of my loved one, my husband of many years, and even though he's saying mean things to me, it's not really him. Helping them to be educated on what it is that they're dealing with, so that they can caregive better. Making sure they know that they should take some time away from it.
That's my next question.
And because as a caregiver, you have increased risk of illness, you have increased risk of depression, you have increased risk of death. And so you need some time away occasionally. It needs to be all figured out. Of course, you're not just going to walk out of the house and leave your loved one if they need care. But you need that time, and you need to go have fun. Many people feel guilty. They shouldn't have fun while my loved one's at home. Yes, you should, because you have to take care of your health so you can take care of your loved one.
What she's talking about is in the 36-hour day, the book in its 7th edition, Mason Rabin's, that's kind of where you begin the caregiver journey and going over the very same things she's talking about. Absolutely essential. The caregiver has the information on how to do it and not just wreck their own life. The first 3 or 4 chapters, so helpful.
I'm getting a flashing light here, so before we run out of battery, apparently, can y'all do your commercial? Do you have a pocket, a 60-second version telling people what you're available to come do for them?
Sure. Since our retirement, we have started a consulting business called Healeys on Aging. Even though we're calling it consulting, we don't do one-on-one visits with people. We're not providing ongoing clinical care, but we will provide education. So if you have a group that you would like educated about, dealing with older adult issues, or what happens when your loved one has dementia, or what happens when you have multiple chronic diseases and so many medicines you don't know what to do with, we are happy to educate lay people. We are happy to educate professionals. We're happy to educate anybody that will listen, because we all, are potentially in a position where we are helping somebody who is aging, whether that's a family member, a client, a colleague, or whomever.
Patrick and Diane Healey, just a couple of the folks we met in this episode that are doing some really good work in the field of dementia, caregiving, and formembering, if I may say so. Allow me to apologize to the Healeys just for a moment for some technical difficulties we had during that interview. Didn't really understand them until we got into the editing process. I suppose if a camera is going to go out, it's better that it's the one on myself and my father, as opposed to the important people in the interview. Well, that's our show for today. Thank you so much for joining us, and I hope you'll be back as we explore the issues and the people living in the world of formembering.
I feel that shutting down on me, and I am so weak in my faith. I need to know you believe for me. Stay. Believe for me, just stay.